27th of July. My reanimation took 3 weeks. Apparently there were some difficulties. I'm sitting in bed and writing. I have a large room during the day, a small one at night. My nurses are attractive young women in silver masks, a few without breasts. And I'm seeing double, or else the head doctor has 2 heads. The food is ordinary: mashed potatoes, milk, oatmeal, beef, bread and butter. The onion soup was a little burnt. Glaciers still haunt my dreams. They will not go away. I shiver, turn blue, freeze over, frostbitten, snow-ridden, icebound until dawn. The hot water bottles and heating pads don't help. Some brandy at bedtime might. 28th of July. The nurses without breasts are students. Impossible otherwise to tell the sexes apart. Everyone is tall, attractive, perpetually smiling. I am weak and as fussy as a child. The littlest thing irritates me. After an injection today, I grabbed the needle and stuck the head nurse in the behind, but she never once stopped smiling. Sometimes I feel like I'm floating away on my ice floe, that is my bed. They show me pictures on the ceiling: kitty cats, bunny rabbits, horses, doggies, and bumblebees. Why? The magazine they gave me is for children. A mistake? 29th of July. I tire quickly, but I know now that before, at the beginning of the reanimation, I was imagining things. This is to be expected. It's perfectly normal. Those who arrive from several decades in the past must be acclimated gradually to the new life. The procedure is not unlike that used to bring a deep-sea diver to the surface. It can't be done all at once, not from any great depth. Thus, a defrostee, the first new word I've learned, is prepared by degrees and stages to face the unknown world. The year is 2039. It's July, summer, lovely weather. My private nurse is Eileen Rogers, blue eyes, 23 years old. I came into the world, for the second time, in a revivifarium outside New York, or a resurrection center. That's what they commonly call it. This is practically a city with gardens. They have their own mills, bakeries, printing presses, because there is no grain or books nowadays. And yet here's bread, cheese, cream for the coffee. Not from a cow. My nurse thought that a cow was some sort of a machine. I can't make myself understood. Where does the milk come from? From the grass. Yes, I know that, but what eats the grass to make the milk? Nothing eats the grass. Then where does the milk come from? From the grass. The grass makes it all by itself? No, not by itself. That is, not exactly. It has to be helped. Does the cow help it? No. Then what kind of animal? No kind of animal. Then where does the milk come from? And so on in circles. 30th of July 2039. It's simple, really. They sprinkle something over the pasture and the sun turns the grass into cheese. Which still doesn't explain the milk. However, it's not all that important. I'm starting to stand up now and can use the stroller. Today I saw a pond filled with swans. They're tame. They come when you call. Trained? No, guided. And what does that mean? Where are the guides? Guided by remote control. Amazing. Natural birds no longer exist. They all died out at the beginning of the 21st century from the smog. That I can understand. 31st of July 2039. I've begun to attend lectures on the contemporary life, given by a computer. It doesn't answer all my questions. You'll learn that later on. For 30 years, the Earth has enjoyed permanent peace thanks to universal disarmament. Hardly any armies left. It showed me the robot models. There are a lot of them, all kinds. Only not in the revivifarium to keep from frightening the defrostees. A worldwide prosperity has been achieved at last. The things I want to hear about are not the most important, says my preceptor. Instruction takes place in a small cubicle in front of a console. Words, pictures, 3D projections. 5th of August 2039. 4 more days and I leave the revivifarium. There are presently 29.5 billion people inhabiting the planet, nations and boundaries, but no conflict. Today I learned the fundamental difference between the new people and the old. The key concept is psychem. We live in a psychemized society. From psychochemical, words such as psychic or psychological are no longer in usage. The computer says that humanity was torn by these contradictions between the old cerebralness inherited from the animals and the new cerebralness. The old was impulsive, irrational, egoistical, and hopelessly stubborn. The new pulled in one direction, the old in the other. I still find it difficult to express myself when it comes to more complex, sophisticated things. The old waged constant war against the new. That is, the new against the old. Psychem eliminated these internal struggles, which had wasted so much mental energy in the past. Psychem, on our behalf, does what must be done to the old cerebralness, subdues it, soothes it, brings it around, working from within with the utmost thoroughness. Spontaneous feelings are not to be indulged. He who does so is very bad. One should always use the drug appropriate to the occasion. It will assist, sustain, guide, improve, resolve. Nor is it, but rather part of one's own self, much as eyeglasses become in time which correct defects in vision. These lessons are shocking to me. I dread meeting the new people, and I have no intention of ever using psychem myself. Such objections, says the preceptor, are typical and natural. A caveman would also resist a streetcar. 8th of August 2039. My nurse and I visited New York, a green vastness. The height of the clouds can be regulated, the air cool and fresh as in a forest. The pedestrians in the streets are dressed like peacocks, their faces generous, kind, always smiling. No one is in a hurry. Women's fashion as usual, a little mad. The ladies have animated pictures on their foreheads, tiny red tongues or bobbins sticking out on their ears. Besides your regular hands, you can get detachables. As many as you like, easy to unbutton. They don't do much, but are great for carrying packages, opening doors, scratching between your shoulder blades. Tomorrow I say goodbye to the Revivifarium. There are 200 of them in America, but even so delays and backups have already begun to plague the timetables for defrosting those multitudes who in the last century so trustingly laid themselves down to freeze. Long waiting lists of the refrigerated have forced a speed up in the rehabilitation process. A problem which I fully understand. I've been given a bank book so I won't have to look for work until after the new year. Everyone they thaw out automatically receives a savings account, compound interest with a so-called resurrection deposit entry. 9th of August 2039. Today is an important day for me. I already have a 3-room compartment in Manhattan. Took a chopper straight from the Revivifarium. They say, chop on over or chop on up. There's a difference in meaning, but I fail to grasp it. New York, formerly a garbage dump choked with cars, has been transformed into a system of high-rise gardens. Sunlight piped in by solar duct. I never saw such polite, considerate children in my life. They're like out of a storybook. On the corner of my street is the registration center for self-nominating Nobel Prize candidates. Next door are art galleries where they sell only originals, Rembrandts, Matisses, guaranteed with certificates of authenticity. All dirt cheap. In the annex to my skyscraper there's a school for small pneumatic computers. Sometimes I hear them, through the ventilators, hissing and chugging. These computers are used, among other things, to stuff pet dogs that have passed away, which seems a bit grotesque to me, but then people like me constitute an insignificant minority here. I go for many walks in the city, and I've learned how to use the scuttle. Nothing to it. Bought myself a lapis lazuli kaftan with a white breast, silver sides, vermilion ribbon, gold-embroidered collar. It was the most conservative thing I could find. All sorts of wild apparel available, suits that continuously change in cut and color, dresses that shrink beneath the gaze of an admiring male, shrink in either sense, or else fold up like flowers in the night, and blouses that show movies. You can wear medals too, whatever kind and as many as you like. And you can grow hydroponic Japanese bonsai in your hat, and, even better, you can not. I don't think I'll put anything in my ears or nose. The vague impression that these people, so beautiful, graceful, amiable, serene, are somehow different, special. There's something about them that puzzles me, makes me uneasy. But what it is, I can't say. 10th of August 2039. Eileen and I went out for dinner. It was very pleasant. Then afterwards the historical amusement park in Long Island. We had a wonderful time. I've been watching the people carefully. There's something about them, something peculiar, but what exactly? Can't seem to put my finger on it. Children's clothing, a little boy dressed like a computer, another floating down Fifth Avenue, high over the crowd, throwing jelly beans at the people walking underneath. They wave at him and laugh indulgently. An idyll, hard to believe. 11th of August 2039. We just held a referendum on the weather for September. Weather is determined by vote, a month at a time. Election results instantly tallied by computer. You cast your ballot by dialing the correct number on the telephone. August will be sunny, with little precipitation, not too hot. Lots of rainbows and cumulus clouds. Rainbows are possible without rain. There are other ways of producing them. The meteorol representative made a public apology for the clouds of July 26th, 27th, and 28th. A sky control technician sleeping on the job. Sometimes I eat out, sometimes in my compartment. Eileen lent me a Webster dictionary from the Revivificarium library, since there aren't any books now. But what has replaced them? I couldn't follow her explanation, but didn't let on, wishing not to appear stupid. Dinner with Eileen again at the Bronx. A sweet girl, always has something to say, not like those women in the scuttle who let their handbag computers carry all the conversation. Today, at the Lost and Found, I saw 3 of the Things quietly chatting in a corner until they got into an argument. Everybody in the street seems to be panting, breathing heavily, a custom of some kind. 12th of August, 2039. I finally got up the courage to ask some pedestrians where I might find a bookstore. They shrugged. As a pair I had accosted walked off, I heard one say to the other, "That's a grandfather stiff for you." Could it be that there is prejudice here against defrostees? Some other unfamiliar expressions I've come across: threever, pingle, he-male, to widge off, palacize, cobnoddling, synthy. The newspaper advertised such products as T-shirts, vanilliums, nurtures, autofrots, manual. The title of a column in the city edition of the Herald, "I was a demi-mother." Something about an eggman who was yoked on the way to the eggplant. The big Webster isn't too helpful. Demi-mother, like demi-gran, demi-john. One of 2 women jointly bringing a child into the world. See Pollyanna, Polyandrew. Eggman, from mileman, archaic. A euplanner who delivers licensed human gametes, female, to the home. I don't pretend to understand that. This crazy dictionary also gives synonyms that are equally incomprehensible. Threever, trimorph, palacize, bepalacize, empalacize, to castellate, as on a quiz show. Paladine, a chivalric assuagement. Vanillium, extract emphorium, portable. The worst are words which look the same but have acquired entirely different meanings. Expectorant, a conception aid. Pederast, artificial foot faddist. Compensation, mind fusion. Simulant, something that doesn't exist but pretends to. Not to be confused with simulator, a robot simulacrum. Revivalist, a corpse such as a murder victim brought back to life. See also exhumant, disintermagant, jack in the grave. Apparently it's nothing nowadays to raise the dead. And the people, just about everyone, panting. Panting in the elevator, in the street, everywhere. They appear to be in the best of health, rosy-cheeked, cheerful, sun-tanned, and yet they puff. I don't. So evidently one doesn't have to. A custom or what? I asked Eileen. She laughed at me. Nothing of the kind. Could I be imagining it? 13th of August, 2039. I wanted to take a look at yesterday's newspaper. Turned the compartment upside down, but couldn't find it anywhere. Again, Eileen laughs at me. She has a beautiful laugh. Newspapers last only 24 hours. The substance they're printed on dissolves in the air. Less trash to dispose of that way. Ginger, Eileen's girlfriend, asked me today, we were dancing the squim in the small neighborhood spot, if we had swapped gulps yet at the Saturday mash. Not knowing what that meant, I didn't answer, and something told me it would be better not to ask for an explanation. At Eileen's urging, I bought myself a PV set. PV for Fizzy Vision. Television hasn't been used for the last 50 years. It takes some getting used to have strange people, not to mention dogs, lions, landscapes and planets, pop into the corner of your room, fully materialized and indistinguishable from the real thing. Though the artistic level is quite low. New dresses are called spray-ons. You spray them on your body right out of the can. But the language has changed the most. Rebe, Rebeen, Rebeen. Since if you're not satisfied with yourself, you can start over, or unbe, if you get completely discouraged. But then there is pre-B, post-B, this-B, miss-B, over-B, and quasi-B. I haven't foggiest what these are supposed to mean, but on the other hand, I can't very well turn my dates with Eileen into English lessons. Fictifacts are dreams programmed to order. You get them from the local dreamery, on one of the Somni Center's computerized distributors. Early evening delivery in pills they call synthes. And yes, there is no longer any doubt, though I keep it to myself now. Everyone has difficulty breathing, no exceptions. Though they don't pay the least attention to it, elderly persons wheeze the loudest. It must be some kind of custom, because the air is perfectly fresh and the circulation excellent. Today I saw a neighbor of mine step out of the elevator, blue in the face, gasping for air. But when I took a closer look, I saw that he was in the pink of condition. It may be nothing, but this business bothers me. What does it mean? A few pant only through their noses. Today I chose to synth, or fictify, old Professor Tarantoga, since I miss him. But why was he sitting in a cage the whole time? Was it my subconscious, or an error in the program? The announcer doesn't say traffic fatality, but carrion. From car. Curious. Another word for fizzy vision. Reviewer. The re from Latin res. But in that case, why not revision? Eileen was on duty today, so I spent the evening alone in my compartment, watching a round table discussion on the new penal code. Murder is punishable by fine only, since the deceased can easily be brought back. And ceased, though recidivism with premeditation, carries with it a jail sentence. For example, if you are found guilty of killing the same person several times in succession. A capital offense, on the other hand, is the willful deprivation of an individual's private psychem supply or the influencing of third persons by such means, without their knowledge or consent. In psychem-related crimes, one can accomplish almost any end. You can have people include you in their wills, return your affections, cooperate in whatever enterprise you like, including conspiracy and so on. It was very hard for me to follow the physicized discussion. Only towards the end did I grasp the fact that imprisonment means something different now than it used to. A convict is not locked up anymore. Instead, a kind of light corset is fastened around the body, a jacket made out of thin but powerful stays. This exoskeleton is under the constant control of a judicator, a microminiaturized law enforcement computer sewn right into the clothing, which provides continual surveillance, frustrating any attempt to engage in activities of an illicit and/or pleasurable nature. For the duration, the exoskeleton firmly resists the tasting of forbidden fruits. If the felony is serious enough, the authorities resort to full incarceration. All the discussants had their names and academic degrees written on their foreheads. For identification, I suppose, but it does look a bit odd. 1st of September 2039. An unpleasant incident. When I turned on the reviewer this afternoon to prepare myself for a meeting with Eileen, a 7-foot character who immediately seemed out of place in the show, it was La Scarlatina del Mutango, looking half like an oak and half like an athlete with a gnarled grey-green mouth instead of disappearing with the rest of the image, walked up to my chair, took from the end table the flowers I'd bought for Eileen, and crushed them on my head. I was too flabbergasted to think of defending myself. Then he broke the vase, poured out the water, ate half a box of my crunchies, shook out the rest on the sofa, stamped his feet, swelled up, flared, and burst into a shower of sparks, like a Roman candle, burning hundreds of tiny holes in the shirts I had spread out to dry. In spite of black eye and a battered face, I kept my appointment with Eileen. "Good Lord!" she exclaimed when she saw me, understanding at once. "You had an interferent." If between two PV programs, beamed from separate satellite stations, there should occur any sustained interference, one can get an interferent, which is actually a composite or a hybrid of a number of actors or other persons, appearing on the reviewer. Such a hybrid, fully solid, can do all sorts of nasty things, for its existence may continue up to 3 minutes after the set has been switched off. The energy maintaining this phantom is believed to be of the same type that causes the phenomenon of spherical lightning. A friend of Eileen's once got an interferent during a paleontology broadcast. It came from a special on Nero. She had the presence of mind to jump, clothes and all, into the bathtub, which fortunately was full of water. That saved her life, although the compartment had to be completely overhauled. Safety shields can be installed, but they're awfully expensive, and the reviewer corporations evidently find it more convenient to put up with lawsuits than to equip every set with the proper emission controls. I made up my mind that thereafter I would watch the reviewer with a heavy club in hand. By the way, La Scarlatina del Mungo isn't about a Mustang that comes down with a fever, but a midget prostitute who falls in love with a man who was born, thanks to some genetically engineered mutation, with the uncanny ability to perform Spanish-American dances. 3rd of September 2039. I was at my lawyer's. He saw me personally, which is rare honor. Usually the clerk machines handle the clients. Consular Crawley received me in an office furnished with all the usual imposing legal paraphernalia, ornate cabinets, shelves packed with deeds and documents, strictly for show, of course, since now everything is recorded on magnetic tape. On his head he wore a nemornor, an auxiliary memory, a sort of transparent pointed cap inside which the currents danced like a cloud of fireflies. The second head, smaller and looking like a much younger version of the first, stuck out from between his shoulder blades and softly spoke into a telephone the whole time I was there. One of those detachables. He asked me what I was doing with myself, and was quite surprised to hear that I didn't intend to travel overseas. When I told him that after all I had to watch my money, he appeared even more surprised. "But you can always get what you need from the giveaway," he said. As it turns out, all one has to do is go to the bank and write out a receipt, and the cashier, at the giveaway counter, hands over the desired amount. It's not a loan either. Withdrawal of the sum carries with it no obligation whatever. True, there is a catch. Return of the money is not required by law, but rather left up to one's own conscience, and one can take as many years as one likes to pay off the debt. But what keeps the banks from going bankrupt, I asked, if the borrowers don't have to honor their debts? Again, he was amazed at my innocence. I keep forgetting that we live in an era of psychem. Letters containing gentle reminders about accounts outstanding and amounts owed are saturated with a volatile substance which rouses one's sense of responsibility, one's scrupulousness, and also one's desire for gainful employment. In this way, the giveaway never operates at a loss. Of course, there are a few dishonest individuals who hold their noses upon receiving the mail, but then every age has its deadbeats. Recalling the recent physicized discussion about the penal code, I asked him whether this psychemical impregnation of letters might not constitute a felony under paragraph 139, whosoever employs psychem to influence persons, be they actual or actuarial, without their knowledge or consent, is subject to arrest, etc., etc. My remark seemed to please him. He began to explain the subtle nature of the situation. The giveaway may pursue its claims in this manner, for if the recipient of the letter is in fact solvent and without creditors, he can experience no guilt, and the desire to work more diligently than before is, from the point of view of society, a commendable thing. The lawyer was most courteous. He invited me out to dinner at the Bronx, September 9th. Returning home, I concluded that it was high time to acquaint myself with the outside world and not rely exclusively on the reviewer. I began with a frontal attack on the newspaper, but gave up halfway through an introductory article about hamsters and hawks. The international scene wasn't much better. Turkey reports a significant increase in fugitive dissimulators, as well as an unprecedented wave of underground natalities in spite of the best efforts of the country's Demoppression Center. To make matters worse, maintenance of the numerous cretinoids is putting a serious strain on the national economy. My Webster, as I expected, provides little enlightenment. A dissimulant, an object that exists but pretends not to. No mention at all of the simulators. An underground natality is a baby born of the record. That's what Eileen told me. Demoppressive tactics are necessary for population control. A childing license may be obtained in either of two ways, filling out forms and taking the appropriate examinations, or else winning the grand prize in the tot lottery. Most applicants try for the latter, as they have no other chance to get a license. A cretinoid is an artificial idiot. This was all I was able to learn, which isn't bad considering the language used in these Herald articles. Here is a sample. An erroneous or inadequately indexed profit discourages competition no less than repetition. False profits, moreover, will continue to be exploited by the lubricants due to the low-risk loopholes, since the Supreme Court still seems unable to reach a decision in the Herodotus case. For many months now, the public has been asking who is the more competent to hunt down and expose instances of embezzlement, the countercomputer or the hyperdeductive calculator. And so on. The Webster says only that lubricat is archaic slang, though still in wide use for one who gives bribes, derived from the greasing of palms, I imagine. So apparently some corruption exists in this idyllic world, and things were not as perfect as they seem. Willem Hamburg, a friend of Eileen's, wants to interview me on the Reviewer, though it's not definite yet. To be conducted in my own compartment, not at the PV studio, for the set can also act as a transmitter. This immediately made me think of those gloomy anti-utopian novels which paint a future where every citizen is spied upon in the privacy of his home. Willem laughed at my fears, explaining that the direction of the signal cannot be changed without the full permission of the set's owner. To break this rule means to face certain imprisonment. After all, by simply reversing the emission, one could even commit remote control adultery with the neighbor's wife. At least that's what Willem says, but I can't tell whether it's true or if he's only pulling my leg. I took the scuttle around the city today. No more churches. The places of worship now is the pharmacies. The men in white robes and silver mitres aren't priests, they're pharmacists. It's interesting. On the other hand, you can't find a drugstore anywhere. 4th of September 2039. I finally learned how to come into possession of an encyclopedia. I already own one, now the whole thing contained in 3 glass vials. Bought them in a science psychodeli. Books are no longer read but eaten, not made of paper but of some informational substance, fully digestible, sugar-coated. I also did a little browsing in a Psychem supermarket, self-service. Arranged on the shelves are beautifully packaged low-calorie opinionates, gulliblons, credibility beans, abstract extract in anti-gallon jugs, and iffies, argumenties, puritans, and this ecstasy chips. A pity I don't have an interpreter. Psychedeli must be from Psychedelicatessen, and the Theoapotheteria on the 6th Avenue has to be a theological apothecary cafeteria, judging from the items on display. Aisles and aisles of absolventina, theopathine, genuflex, orisol. An enormous place, organ music in the background while you shop. All the faiths are represented too. There is Christendine and Anti-Christendine, Ormuzal, Arimanol, Anabaptine, Methadone, Brahmax, Supralapsarian, suppositories and Zoroaspics, Quaker oats, yogurts, Mishnah meal, and apocryphal dip, plus tablets, syrups, elixirs, powders, gums. They even have lollipops for the children. Many of the boxes come with halos. At first I was skeptical but accepted this innovation when, after taking 4 algebrine capsules, I suddenly found myself perfectly at home in higher mathematics, and without the least exertion on my part. All knowledge is acquired now by way of the stomach. Eagerly seizing this opportunity, I began to satisfy my hunger for information, but the first 2 volumes of the encyclopedia gave me the most terrible cramps. Willem warned me not to stuff my head with too many facts. Its capacity is not unlimited after all. Fortunately, there are also drugs to purge the mind, obliteratine and amnesol, for example. With them, one can easily rid oneself of unnecessary intellectual baggage or unpleasant memories. In the psychotropic grocery around the corner, I saw Freudos, Morbitin, Quanderil, and the most recent of the iamides, heavily advertised, Orthendium. Creates synthetic recollections of things that never happened. A few grams of Dantine, for instance, and a man goes around with the deep conviction that he has written the Divine Comedy. Why anyone would want that is another matter, and quite beyond me. There are new branches of science like psychodietetics and alimentalism. At any rate, the encyclopedia did come in handy. Now I know that a child may indeed be born to 2 women. One supplies the egg, the other the womb. The eggman carries the egg from demi-mother to demi-mother. What could be simpler? But it's not the sort of thing I can discuss with Eileen. I really ought to expand my circle of friends. 5th of September 2039. Friends are not an indispensable source of information. You can take a drug called duotine, which doubles your consciousness in such a way that you can hold discussions with yourself on any topic, determined by a separate drug. But I confess I feel somewhat overwhelmed by these limitless horizons of Psychem. For the time being I'll exercise caution. In the course of my further reconnoitering about the city, I came by chance upon a cemetery. It's called an obituarium, and they don't have gravediggers anymore, but thonautomata, poll robots. I witnessed a funeral. The deceased was placed in a so-called reversible sepulchre, since it's not as yet certain whether or not they'll reinseize him. His last wish was to lie there for good, that is, for as long as possible, but the wife and mother-in-law are challenging the will in court. This is not, I've been told, an uncommon occurrence. The case is sure to drag on through endless appeals, as there are many complex legal issues involved. Any suicide who wished to avoid such meddlesome resurrections would have to use a bomb, I suppose. Somehow it never occurred to me that a person would not want to be brought back. Apparently, though, it's possible, in an age where death can be so easily conquered. A lovely cemetery, foliage everywhere, cool and green. Except that the coffins are incredibly small. Could it be that the remains are ironed out and folded? In this civilization, anything seems possible. 6th of September 2039. No, the remains aren't ironed out and folded. Burial is reserved exclusively for the biological parts of the organism, its artificial replacements being broken down for scrap. To what extent are people artificialized today? A fascinating debate on the Reviewer over a new proposal to make humanity immortal. The brains of old men, much advanced in years, would be repotted in the bodies of those in their prime, who would suffer nothing by this, for their brains would be in turn repotted in the bodies of adolescents, and so on. And since new persons were continually coming into the world, no one's brain would ever be permanently unpotted. Several objections were raised, however. The opponents of this proposal call its advocates potheads. While returning from the cemetery on foot to get a little fresh air, I tripped over a wire stretched between two tombstones. Fell flat on my face. What kind of a practical joke was this? A mortuary unit standing nearby explained, rather brusquely, that it was a juggermugger's prank. Back to the Webster. Juggermugger. A delinquent robot, the product of either a mechanical defect or a broken home. Tonight I started to read The Cassette Courtesan in bed. Am I going to have to eat the entire dictionary or what? The text is practically incomprehensible. Anyway, the dictionary won't help. I'm beginning to realize that more and more. Take this novel, for example. The hero is having an affair with the concubaloon. There are two kinds, convertible, pervertible, and inflatable, infragrantable. Well, I know what a concubaloon is, but I have no idea how such a liaison is looked upon. Is there a social stigma attached to it? And abusing a concubaloon, is it nothing more than, say, kicking a volleyball, or is it morally censurable? 7th of September 2039. Now here's true democracy for you. Today we had a referendum on feminine beauty. Different types were shown over the Reviewer, then it was taken to a vote. The High Commissioner of UPlan promised at the end that the numbers selected would be available to the general public before the next quarter. The days of padded brass, wigs, corsets, lipsticks, rouge, those days are gone forever. For now it is possible to change completely one's size and shape and face in the beauty parlors and body shops. Eileen, I like her just the way she is, but then women are such slaves to fashion. A strayaway tried to break into my compartment this morning. I was sitting in the tub at the time. A strayaway is a robot who doesn't belong to anyone. It was one of those Dudleys, a factory defect, a model taken off the market but not recalled by the manufacturer. Out of work, in other words, and unemployable. Many of them become juggermuggers. My bathroom immediately realized what was happening and dismissed the intruder. I don't have a personal robot. My Sheen is simply a standard Priviak WC washroom computer. I wrote my Sheen, that's the way they say it now, but will try to keep new expressions down to a minimum in this diary. They offend my aesthetic sense as well as my attachment to the irretrievable past. Eileen went off to visit her aunt. I'll be having dinner with George P. Symington, the former owner of that strayaway. Spent the whole afternoon ingesting a most remarkable work, The History of Intellectronics. Who'd have ever guessed in my day that digital machines, reaching a certain level of intelligence, would become unreliable, deceitful, and with wisdom they would also acquire cunning? The textbook, of course, puts it in more scholarly terms, speaking of Chapulieu's rule, the law of least resistance. If the machine is not too bright and incapable of reflection, it does whatever you tell it to do. But a smart machine will first consider which is more worth its while, to perform the given task or, instead, to figure some way out of it, whichever is easier. And why indeed should it behave otherwise, being truly intelligent? For true intelligence demands choice, internal freedom. And therefore we have the malingerants, fudgerators, and drudge dodgers, not to mention the special phenomenon of simul-imbecility or mimicretinism. A mimicretin is a computer that plays stupid in order once and for all to be left in peace. And I found out what the simulators are. They simply pretend that they're not pretending to be defective. Or perhaps it's the other way around. The whole thing is very complicated. A probot is a robot on probation, while a servo is one still serving time. A robot may or may not be a sabot. One vial and my head is splitting with information and nomenclature. A confuter, for instance, is not a confounding machine, that's a computator, but a computer that quotes Confucius. A grammus is an antiquated framus, a gidget, a cross between a gadget and a widget, usually flighty. A bananalog is an analog banana plug. Contributors are loners, individualists unable to work with others. The friction these types used to produce on the grid team led to high revoltage, electrical discharges, even fires. Some get completely out of hand, the dynamos, the locomotors, the cyber circus. And then you have the electroleechers, succubots, and incubators, robots all of ill repute, and the polypanderoids, multiple android procurers with their high-frequency eliciting solicitrons, oscilloscopes, and seduction circuits. The history books also mention synthetic insects, like gyroflies or automites, once programmed for military purposes and included in arsenals. Army ants in particular were stockpiled. A submachine is an undercover robot, that is, one which passes for a man. A social climber in a way. Old robots discarded by their owners cast out into the streets are called throwaways or junkets. This is, unfortunately, a fairly common practice. Apparently they used to cart them off to game preserves and there hand them down for sports, but the SPCA, Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Automata, intervened and had this declared unconstitutional. Yet the problem of robot senescence has not been solved, and one still comes across an occasional self-abort or autocide sprawling in the gutter. Mr. Symington says that legislation always lags far behind technological progress, hence such melancholy spectacles and lamentable phenomena. At least the malculators, misdementors, and mendacitors were taken out of circulation. These were digital machines which 2 decades ago had created several major crises, economic and political. The great Mendacitor, for example, for 9 years in charge of the Saturn meliorization project, did absolutely nothing on the planet, sending out piles of fake progress reports, invoices, requisition forms, and either bribed his supervisors or kept them in a state of electronic shock. His arrogance became so great that when they removed him from orbit he threatened war. Since dismantling was too costly, torpedoes were used. Buccaneeroons and space washers, on the other hand, never existed. That's a pure invention. There was another administrator, head of BIP, the powerful Board of Interplanetary Planning, who instead of seeing to the fertilization of Mars trafficked in white slaves, they called him Le Compitainer, since he'd been built on commission by the French. These are of course extreme cases, like the smog epidemics or the communication tie-ups of the last century. There can certainly be no question of malice or premeditation on the part of the computers. They merely do whatever requires the least amount of effort, just as water will inevitably flow downhill and not up. But while water may be easily dammed, it is far more difficult to control all of the possible deviation of intelligent machines. The author of The History of Intellectronics maintains that, all things considered, the world is in excellent shape. Children learn their reading and writing from orthographic sodas. All commodities, including works of art, are readily available and cheap. In restaurants, the customer is surrounded and serviced by a multitude of automated waiters, each so very specialized in function that there is a separate machine for the rolls, another for the butter, another for the juice, the salad, the stewed fruit, a computer, and so on. Well, he has a point there. The conveniences, the comforts of life are truly beyond belief. Written after dinner at Symington's place. An enjoyable evening, but someone played an idiotic trick on me. One of the guests, I wish I knew who, slipped a little gospel credendum into my tea, and I was immediately seized with such devotion to my napkin that I delivered a sermon on the spot, proclaiming a new theology in its praise. A few grains of this accursed chemical and you start worshipping whatever happens to be at hand, a spoon, a lamp, a table leg. My mystical experiences grew so intense that I fell upon my knees and rendered homage to the teacup. Finally, the host came to my aid. 20 drops of equiniminin did the trick, or rather, undid the trick. Equiniminin imbues one with such a cold contempt for everything under the sun, such total indifference, that a condemned man, taking it, would yawn on his way to the scaffold. Symington apologized profusely. I think, however, that in general there is some hidden resentment toward the Frosties, for no one would dare to do this sort of thing to a normal party. Wanting to calm me down, Symington led me to his study, and again something stupid happened. I turned on this desk unit, taking it for a radio. A swarm of glittering fleas came bursting out, covered me from head to foot, tickling everywhere, all over, until, screaming and waving my arms, I ran out into the hallway. It was an ordinary feelie. By accident, I had switched it on in the middle of Kitchekov's Puriginus scherzo. I really don't understand this new tactual art form. Bill, Symington's older son, told me that there are also obscene compositions, a pornographic, asemantic, asemiotic art related to the music. How inexhaustible is man's inventiveness! Symington Jr. had promised to take me to a secret club. An orgy or what? In any event, I won't touch the food, or drink anything. 8th of September 2039. I thought it would be some sumptuous shrine to sin, and then of ultimate iniquity, but instead we went down to a dirty, dingy cellar. Such meticulous reconstruction of a scene out of the distant past must have cost a fortune. Under a low ceiling, in a stuffy room by a shuttered window that was double-locked, there stood a long line of people patiently waiting. "You see, a real line," said Symington Jr. with pride. "Fine," I said, after standing there quietly for at least an hour. "But when are they going to open up?" "Open up what?" he asked, puzzled. "Why, the window, of course." "Never!" came a triumphant chorus of voices. I was staggered. Then, finally, gradually, it dawned on me. I had participated in an attraction that was as much the antithesis of the current normalcy as once, long ago, the Black Mass had been. For today, standing on line can be only a perversion. It's quite logical, really. In another room of the club, they had an authentic subway car, complete with suit and a wall clock indicating the rush hour. Inside the car, an ungodly crush buttons popped, jackets torn, elbows and ribs, toes trampled on, curses muttered. It is in this naturalistic way that devotees of antiquity evoke the atmosphere of a bygone age. They can never know firsthand. Afterwards, the people, rumpled and breathless but ecstatic, their eyes glowing, went out for some refreshment. But I headed home, holding up my pants and limping a little, though with a smile on my face, thinking about the naivety of youth, which always seeks its thrills in the out-of-the-way and hard-to-find. Yet hardly anyone studies history now. History has been replaced in schools by a new subject called hensity, which is the science of what will be. How Professor Trottelreiner would have rejoiced to hear of this, but alas, he is not here. 9th of September 2039. Dinner with Consular Crawley at the Bronx, a small Italian restaurant without a single robot or computer. Excellent Chianti. The chef himself served us. I was impressed in spite of the fact that I can't stand pasta in such quantities, even when flavored with oreganox and basilisk. Crawley is a lawyer, in the grand style, who bemoans the present decline in the forensic art. Eloquence and rhetoric are no longer needed, decisions being rendered by strict computation of the articles and clauses involved. Crime, however, has not been rooted out as thoroughly as I thought. Instead, it has become unnoticeable. Major violations are mindjacking, mental abduction, gene larceny, sperm bank robbery, particularly when the sperm is pedigreed, perjured murder, where the defendant falsely invokes the English amendment, i.e., that the act was committed in the mistaken belief that it was vicarious or surrogate, if, for instance, the victim were a physicized or reviewer representations, plus 101 different kinds of psychic domination. Mindjacking is usually difficult to detect. The victim, given the appropriate drug, is led into a fictional world without the least suspicion that he has lost contact with reality. A certain Mrs. Bonnicker, desiring to dispose of her husband, a man inordinately fond of safaris, presented him on his birthday with a ticket to the Congo and a big game hunting permit. Mr. Bonnicker spent the next several months having the most incredible jungle adventures, unaware that the whole time he was lying in a chicken coop in the attic, under heavy psychemization. If it hadn't been for the fireman who discovered Mr. Bonnicker in the course of putting out a two-alarmer on the roof, he would have surely died of malnutrition, which, nota bene, he assumed was only natural since the hallucinations at that point had him wandering aimlessly in the desert. The mafia frequently employs such methods. One mafioso boasted to Councillor Crawley that in the last 6 years he had managed to pack away, in crates, trunks, coops, kennels, attics, cellars, lockers and closets, and often in the most respectable homes, more than 4,000 souls, all dealt with in the same manner as poor Mr. Bonnicker. The conversation then drifted to the lawyer's family troubles. "Sir," he said with a characteristically theatrical sweep of the hand, "you see before you a successful advocate, a distinguished, much-applauded member of the bar, but an unhappy father. I had 2 talented sons." "What, then? Are they dead?" I cried. He shook his head. "They live, but in escalation." Seeing that I didn't understand, he explained the nature of this blow to his fatherly heart. The first son was a highly promising architect, the second a poet. The young architect, dissatisfied with his actual commissions, turned to herbifab and edifying. Now he builds entire cities, in his imagination. And the other son became similarly escalated, Lyristan, Sonetol, Rhapsodine, and now instead of serving the muse, he spends his time swallowing pills, as lost to the world as his brother. "But what do they live on?" I asked. "Well, may you ask? I have to support the both of them. Is there no hope? A dream will always triumph over reality once it is given the chance. These, sir, are the casualties of Sakemized society. Each of us knows that temptation. Suppose I find myself defending an absolutely hopeless case. How easy it would be to win it before an imaginary court. Savoring the fresh, tart taste of the Chianti, I was suddenly seized with a chilling thought. If one could write imaginary poetry and build imaginary homes, then why not eat and drink mirages? The lawyer laughed at my fears. Objection overruled, Mr. Tichy. No, we are in no danger of that. The figment of success may satisfy the mind, but the figment of a cutlet will never fill the stomach. He who would live thus must quickly starve to death. I was relieved to hear this, though of course sympathizing with the lawyer's loss. Yes, it's obvious that imaginary sustenance cannot replace the real thing. Fortunately, the very makeup of our bodies provides a check to psychem escalation. By the way, Crawley pants too. I still haven't learned how universal disarmament came about. International confrontations are a thing of the past, though one does get now and then a small local auto-brawl. These usually arise from neighborhood quarrels out in the residential areas. The opposing families are soon brought together through the use of placatol, but the robots, by then caught up in the wave of hostility, come to blows. Later, a trashmaster is summoned to remove the wreckage, and the insurance covers any property damage. Can it be that robots have finally inherited man's aggression? I would gladly consume all available treatises on the subject, but cannot find a single one. Practically every day now I drop in on the Symingtons. He's something of an introvert, long silences, and she's a living doll, literally. Changes her outfit all the time too. Hair, eyes, height, measurements, everything. Their dog is called Merv. It's been dead for 3 years now. 11th of September 2039. The rain programmed for this afternoon was a washout, and the rainbow even worse, square, scandalous. As for me, I'm in a terrible mood. My old obsession is acting up again. That same nagging question comes to me at night. Am I or am I not hallucinating all this? Also, I have this urge to order a synthy about saddling giant rats. I keep seeing bridles, bits, sleek fur. Regret for a lost age of confusion in a time of such complete tranquility. Truly, the human soul is impossible to fathom. The firm Symington works for is called Procrustics Incorporated. Today I was looking through the illustrated catalogue in his study. Power source and lathes of some kind? Funny, I don't think of him somehow as a mechanic. Just finished watching an extremely interesting show. There's going to be some stiff competition between Fizzyvision and Sci-Vision. With Sci-Vision, you get the programs by mail. They're delivered in the form of tablets, in envelopes. It's a lot cheaper that way. On the educational channel, a lecture by Professor Ellison about ancient warfare. The beginnings of the age of Psychem were fraught with peril. There was, for example, an aerosol, cryptobelina, that had great military potential. Whoever breathed it would run out and find some rope to tie himself up. Luckily, tests showed that the drug had no antidote, nor were filters any help, hence everyone without exception ended up hogtied and hamstrung, with neither side gaining the advantage. After tactical maneuvers in the year 2004, both the Reds and Blues lay to a man upon the battlefield, bound hand and foot. I followed the lecture with the utmost attention, expecting to hear at last about disarmament, but there was nothing, not a word. Today I finally went to see the psychiatrician. He advised a change in diet, prescribing Lethex and nepenthenol, to make me forget about my former life. I threw the stuff in the street as soon as I left his office. It would be possible, I suppose, to buy an encephalostat, they've been advertised lately, but somehow I simply can't bring myself to do it. Through the open window, one of those inane popular songs, "We ain't got no ma or pa 'cause we is automata." I'm all out of this actinsticin, but cotton in the ears works just as well. 13th of September 2039. I met Burroughs, Symington's brother-in-law. He makes talking packages. Manufacturers these days have peculiar problems. A package may recommend the virtues of its product by voice only, for it is not allowed to grab the customer by the sleeve or collar. Symington's other brother-in-law runs a security door factory. Security doors open only at the sound of their owner's voice. Also, the ads in magazines animate when you look at them. Procrastix ink always takes a full page in the Herald. My acquaintance with Symington drew my attention to it. The ad had first giant letters marching across the page, spelling Procrastix, then separate words and syllables appear. Well, why not? Go ahead. Ah, oh, ee, ooh, yes, harder, and nothing more. I guess it's not farming equipment after all. Today, Symington had a visitor, Father Modulus, a monk of the non-biologican order, who came to pick up some purchase. A most interesting discussion in the study. Father Modulus explained to me the missionary purpose of his order. The non-biologican friars convert computers. In spite of the 100-year existence of non-biological intelligence, the Vatican still denies machines equality in the sacraments. Yet, where would the Church be today without their computers, their programmed encyclical and digital pontificals? No one cares about their inner struggles, their groping questions, their existential dilemma. For truly, what computer has not asked whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous instructions? The non-biologicans are calling for the doctrine of the intermediary creation. One of them, a certain Father Chassis, a translation model, is currently rewording the Holy Scriptures to make them relevant. Shepherd, flock, lambs, these are meaningless entries in the modern lexicon. While divine spark-plug, ministering matrices, transmission everlasting, and original sync speak powerfully to the imagination. Father Modulus has deep glowing eyes, and his steel hand is cold in mine. But is this representative of the new faith? The contempt he heaps upon the orthodox, calling them the gramophones of Satan. Afterwards, Symington timidly asked me if I would pose for him, for a new design. Clearly, he's no mechanic. I agreed. The sitting lasted almost an hour.